Vlatka, welcome. Great to see you. How are you?
Thank you. Very good, very good. Sunny Friday, so not complaining.
Fridays are always good, aren't they? Fridays are good. Could you briefly introduce yourself, your work with IR Group, and the kinds of situations that owners and operators typically come to you for support with?
I'm founder of the IR Group company, and I'm really on a mission to help more independent hotels. Yeah, with revenue profitability, their bottom line. So really it comes from the experience with working for different chains, working in the US and EU, really being in revenue now for like 12 years. And I really want to make an impact to the ones that are not really doing it properly, or maybe they don't have the budget for the revenue managers.
So before we touch sort of revenue systems or pricing tactics, I want to stay on how commercial performance actually behaves in practice. So let's get into a bit into your experience. Where do hotels most often struggle? Is it the tools themselves or how teams, decisions and incentives sit around them?
It's often a little bit of both. We are really, often I see that different teams are working in silos. And that's something that I'm also trying to educate around and really break that pattern, because I think some of the most successful organizations are really when teams are really aligned and working towards the same KPIs, which, it needs to happen between all the commercial departments, but as well then the financial department, and it really needs to be collaboration. And when we do revenue, we're really kind of tapping into every single area of the hotel. So you also need to, work really well with your front desk or operations, because they're the ones that are maybe going to upsell or things like that. So we kind of really tap into every area. And that's why we need to also kind of have this role of connecting different areas within the hotel, because I think then it really produces better results.
You've spoken before about experience and intuition sitting alongside the data. In practice, where does data fall short and where does judgment still do the heavy lifting?
Yeah, well, I think now we really do have quite good revenue softwares that you're really kind of, if you have everything set up correctly, or you're really kind of monitoring the system's decisions, and it's capable of making a lot more decisions, in a short time that we can as a human. Of course, I think what I see not happening enough is going back to analyze the performance and then learning from it. I see that a lot, because being in revenue, you're really, really busy normally, and you're getting pulled on all sides. So I really see everybody focusing on the future. But then what did we learn from the past? So that's, I think, something where everybody should spend more time in these retro analysis. If you're running a huge promotion and then you maybe have results, we booked 2 million with this promotion, right? Mm-hmm. Now everybody's very happy. But then the question is, okay, what would you have maybe booked with this promotion without it? Because you would have been still booking. So this is the area where we're lacking. Okay, what are the people that already had a reservation and actually rebooked maybe at the lower price because you ran a promotion? So these are all kinds of analysis. Okay, what really worked? What kind of perks worked? What can we do differently? The cancellation policy work this time. Should we adjust? And I think also, it has to be aligned with your brand. So when you're running promotion, it cannot just be coming from revenue. Well, I need help in Q1, right? Because it is that period. But it needs to be, okay, where does it sit with our branding? Does it make sense to do big discounts or things, or how are we going to present it?
Yes.
So it's really like, analyzing what you really need, up really, really ahead. So I'm always a fan, for example, in this situation, to have this promotional calendar for the whole year. And so you do it kind of as part of the budget process.
Sure.
Yeah.
100%. And what you were talking about there, the team discussions and so on, and this debrief, I think that's super wise, but also having, for example, finance as part of that as well, because it's all very well, you're hitting your RevPAR goals, but what's the flow through of that business, that promotion, and what else was out there? What else could we have captured? And was it the right decision? But the thing is, because it's such a perishable stock that you have, as soon as that day's done, and the next day, I remember being on property and always, because I was looking after groups, I was like talking 3 years down the line, it's crazy. What happened yesterday was happening today was almost not part of the conversation.
Indeed. And as you mentioned, the whole finance involvement, right? we are doing these things. I mean, we need to focus on profitability. So that's why I say at IA Group, I'm not the revenue consultant, I'm profitability consultant.
Yeah.
From the revenue perspective, of course, our main focus is on the top line. But at the end of the day, it's really about the bottom line, right? So
Completely.
Analyzing what is the cost of each business? What is the cost of this promotion if I do it on a different OTA or direct or not? So these are the kind of things that I think we really need to now continuously monitor, because costs are going up, right? Every year it's So is it expected that our rates are just going to continuously go up? Of course, when you do the budget, are right. But what is the reality? What is the reality that it's going to actually, what is going to happen? So I think, really focusing on what is the cost of each business, especially now. Let's say, I'm having a client, it is their down season, right? It's still a little cold, things are just ramping up.
Sure.
It is a seasonal property. And the first thing I asked, like, what does it cost us to rent one room? And that is, determining then actually, okay, I should really not go below this kind of rate, even if it's dead Sunday.
Yeah.
So
basics.
Looking at these things together, I think it really makes sense. When you
completely. You've got to really understand what the cost of each room is, how to turn it, and are we being busy fools? Is it easier just to leave some of those rooms unsold, or to take them at a heavily discount rate where everyone's just going to be running around crazy? You're going to have inflated payroll, you're going to have inflated energy, and it's not actually going to drive to the bottom line. This is a quick one, but if we talk about the one commercial team reality, because we've intimated it there in what we're talking about, pulling together. So what does that actually look like on the ground? And when teams aren't aligned, what tends to break first?
I think a long time ago, we really had this misalignment between sales and revenue, but that is a little bit of a history. I think we're a lot more aligned there. And, it's really about understanding each other and what the needs are, right? When you're giving that rate for a certain volume, a big volume of business or whatnot. But I think in general, a lot of things can break, right? Somebody from e-commerce could be spending money on Google Ads for a period or a market where you don't have a need for it from revenue, right? So it is, you could be spending money that you should not be spending, for example.
Correct.
Right? Or
they could be duplicating the efforts of the brand or whatever.
You can have, for example, your marketing brand team really focusing on growing your direct business. And then you, from the revenue perspective, are also in charge of OTA. So like, how are we going to balance that? Our KPIs need to be aligned, right? So I also have to have somewhere on the paper that I am focusing solely on direct business, and then it's okay if the other business that I'm responsible for goes down, then we know why, and then this is the strategy, right? These are the things.
You see that so much where you've got sort of these misaligned KPIs and they tend to pit then departments against each other. I mean, how common is that still in the hotels you see, and what does it cost them?
It is really, really common. And I think, every client I work with, everybody is focusing, let's say, on their direct business, right? Because it costs less. It still costs, but it costs less. So, what I really see is, especially independents, they're not really trusting the OTAs a lot. So you have this situations where they're actually inflating rates on the whole segment because they don't trust about this whole resale and B2B distribution that you kind of don't have a grasp on. So and then of course that will hurt your placement on your OTA, these kind of things, right? So what I really see is a little bit of mistrust from the independent on how to really work with different OTA partners, because if you have everything aligned, everything should be aligned, right? And you can always give a little bit of advantage with different perks on your direct, right? But then what I really see is sometimes also the independents cannot support everything on their direct. Maybe they cannot do mobile discounts, or maybe they cannot do membership, loyalty, these kind of things.
System challenges. Okay.
So these are the kind of things that I really see is a little bit of this mistrust.
Do you feel or see that the landscape is shifting with a lot of this now going upstream, with AI being so prevalent and a lot of, people are utilizing LLMs to natively search for something, and then, they're being recommended through their search histories as opposed to through the OTAs. Are you seeing this shift, and how's that impacting hotels' decisions?
Well, I think the shift that I see is that is still kind of not happening, is or not happening a lot because I'm guilty of it, right? I have three AIs that I copy
Yeah.
paste the prompt to, and they all
Okay.
slightly respond differently. If I'm traveling somewhere, I love to travel. That's why I'm in this industry, and I will ask, okay, where do I go? Where do I stay? And then this is really a lot of hotels still have not really you know have done their SEO to be present on AI platforms, these kind of things. So I think it's just creating this whole another.
Yeah, they need to control their narrative.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, yeah, people have at this point Google search down and these kind of things. But now it's a whole another level where we really need to also see, okay, am I going to show up there? because because those are the things that will in the end be, yeah, some of the main platforms where people are going to decide on where to stay,
Completely.
travel, and all of that.
Especially when an independent hotel has limited marketing spend and they're thinking, where am I going to put this? Am I really going to put this now on the OTA? Because is it going to get where I need to be? And it can't base it on historical trends because all of that is changing. On that, a perfect segue, because we're talking about historical trends. And at the beginning of the show, we talked a little bit about this feasibility of a project. So it's obviously close to my heart. And because, I was speaking to owners and investors, feasibility does get done at the development stage. And, is it a dark art? I mean, they're looking at all these kind of things, but from what you're saying, they're not necessarily talking to the people who might give them a better insight. Assumptions get baked in, you say years sometimes, especially if it's a new build, before those doors could open. And then the operational teams, particularly yourselves and revenue, handed the number and told to go to deliver against this. Thanks very much. How often do you see that disconnect in practice? And would you like to see better collaboration between development, investment, revenue? What would it look like?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you are the expert in your field, right? So this should still come from you. But I think for any feasibility study, revenue should be slightly involved. And does it make sense?
Yeah.
Because we need to
A seat at the table.
yeah, especially if it's a new market, I need to do the research on that market anyways, right? So I should be kind of part of this process where, like, do the numbers make sense, right? Before we confirm them. And of course, it's a little bit like what will happen when it happens, because you're really talking about 3, 4, 5 years ahead.
Sure. Crystal ball territory.
Yeah, it is a little bit okay. But yeah, what I've done a lot in this situation, also I compared the expectations. If it's a new market for us, let's say, I would compare expectations with my experience, what happened in different similar or like markets. Right. So the markets that are maybe having similar numbers or similar patterns, those are the things that I would then look into. Yeah. And I'm not sure if you're, for example, doing this from the investment side, you're probably also kind of comparing what happens in another like property or like market, right? But I think that collaboration could definitely improve. I don't really, every company I worked in, it was really in silos, these two departments, right?
Yeah, that's it. And talking different languages sometimes, industry languages. It should be a one team approach. It should be like a relay, because at the end of the day, you're passing that baton. And the thing is, what you want is the destination, everyone is aligned, because the owner wants to be as profitable and ramp up as quickly as possible and exit at a profit. And the brand wants the hotel to be as successful as possible, because, their fees are based on mutual success. So there should be, yeah, I think it's about these silos that need to be broken down.
Yeah. I don't know what this looks like in practice, right? But it's something I think that we don't really.
Well, the thing is, sometimes people are in different buildings, they're different cities, sometimes different countries. And, it doesn't have to be a long, detailed process. It's more like, could you sense check this? Does this make sense, or does this offend you? Because I've spoken to so many revenue people over the years. They're like, this is madness. May as well start again.
But I mean, we are all like experts in a different field here. So I think we can also, through this process, really learn from each other, right? And then if I understand what your way of thinking is, why do you think this? And that also then helps me understand of, what kind of picture do you see behind this kind of project?
Yeah, yeah. And look, I guess some people are probably out doing this and they've been doing it and they're doing it very well. I'm just thinking it's a best practice that people, shouldn't miss a trick there, because there's something that happens here and then there's a commercial reality, and the two need to be the same. Vlatka, you made the case for bringing finance in earlier, definitely before pricing decisions get made. What does good collaboration between commercial teams and finance actually look like in practice? What are you seeing?
I will give you one example that I thought was brilliant that I experienced. So one of the companies I worked for actually hired a role which was kind of like a commercial finance bridge. Yeah. And so they really, that person had a commercial and finance background, right? So let's say when we were going through the budget process, this person was aligning the two departments, because it's often misaligned when you're going through this process.
Yeah, sure.
The top line and then the cost is being done. And then in the end, they're like, this doesn't work on the bottom line. Go back to your drawing table, right?
Yeah, completely.
These are the things. This is one example where I think it really helps throughout these things where we really need to collaborate, like the budget. And, our finance department mostly is the one, like the main connection with the owners, right? So it's also about often us feeding the information of why something is performing the way it's performing to the finance, that it actually gets to the right, to the right audience, the right information.
Yeah.
So, and I had also like, there was a moment I worked for one chain, and somebody from actually the development and investment was the one having kind of explaining the performance of different hotels to the banks, right? To the investors.
Yes.
And
yes.
And then sometimes he would come to me like, hey, can you give me an information? What's going on? Why is it so? In the beginning, I was, just like feeding a little bit of information. This is why this hotel is performing like that. And this is what the expectations are. And then in the end, we realized actually, like cut the middleman out. So I ended up having the bank presentations monthly.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So I would actually say, hey, this is why the hotel is performing the way it is, and these are the expectations. And
that's a lot more powerful.
Sense. That made a lot of sense. So we are the ones really doing the revenue strategy. So yeah.
No, I think I love that. And I think by creating this bridge in the example you've given, it really helps the people on the ground understand the business better, why certain decisions are being made, and why certain pieces of business are maybe being turned down or challenged, even though they've been there for 10 years or whatever. There's more profitable business out there. This is not great business.
Ahmed, my strategy always has been like provide as much information as you can to different audiences. And then things are being less questions and more understood. So this is always kind of, where I stand, creating this commercial awareness throughout the different departments, right?
Let me build on that, because you've talked about providing more information and then coming to a joint consensus. And it builds quite nicely as I flow into AI, because you and I are talking on a panel next week about AI. From where you sit, where's it actually being used? And where's that gap between expectation and reality? And in addition to that, there's so much data. How do people see the wood for the trees?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward actually to our panel in Amsterdam next week.
We'll have a good chat.
Yeah. So as we are calling it, AI without a hype. I think it's quite a hype when it still comes to let's first focus on revenue, then we're going to talk hotels. So from the revenue perspective, there are some systems that are using AI, but it's often analyzing your data and giving you suggestions of what you should focus on. That's where I see it mostly used. The systems, when it comes to pricing decisions and things like that, mostly are still machine learning. So so a lot of systems, unfortunately, are selling that they are full on AI, which I'm like, okay, what part is AI? And then, I would do demo of the system. I'm like, this is not really AI, right? Of course. So this is a bit of a hype, and everybody, of course, is kind of like overusing this word in their, the systems, and which is not really big. So where
the answer to everything.
Yeah. Where it happens in hotels, I do see a great benefit of automating certain tasks with AI. And this is like, I think in the long run. If I just look at, for example, reservations department, this is the department that always has all these little tasks. And throughout the day, I was director of reservations back in the day at the Pierre Hotel. So these are
Low
the kind of
volume, the
things, you
same
know,
stuff over and over.
cleaning your data, these kind of things. I think it's really great to use the AI models for that and agents. And there are some companies where you can actually, you know, profile cleanup, these kind of things, right? So you can really utilize it there, I think. And this is, I think, the great benefit that then actually your staff can focus on different things. There is also a bit of a hype of, are we all going to lose our jobs? I don't think we're going to lose our jobs. I think our jobs will just evolve, and they are already evolving. If I think about it,
Yes.
yeah, when I studied revenue 12 years ago, it took me 2 hours to create a sheet in Excel that I would then make a decision on. And
it's crazy. The time that used to be wasted. Yeah.
And now I'm sleeping and the rates are changing, right? And then when I wake up, I will see
it's all optimized automatically.
Exactly. Yeah. So already our revenue job is completely different. And it will also then change. You will just, you will look into how to have more integrated systems. Yeah.
Well, as you say, it frees up time. It doesn't get rid of jobs. It gets rid of tasks. And if that can free up time for, you were talking about earlier on, of being able to have the ability to look back and decide whether something was the right decision and what else could have been done.
One very common misperception, for example, so back to Citizen, for example, they are the inventors of the kiosk at the front desk, right? The reason why they invented the kiosk is because, they really looked at, okay, what is everything in a hotel? And that frustrates me. And one of the things was long lines at the front desk, right? When I'm checking in. So they're like, okay, how can we automate this? And a lot of people think like, oh, they have kiosks, so there is no people. But that is not correct. Then actually our staff, which we call ambassadors, could just chat with you. How are you? They could really spend time on guest engagement and not, oh, okay, what is your name and what is your password? You can do that yourself with clicks. And people
more focuses then on experience and upsell and just general hospitality. Which is,
so I think this is an example of how automation changed. But often I hear this where people are reluctant, like, oh, but then, I don't feel welcomed or things like that. It's like, no, people are still going to be there. People's job is just going to change.
Well, that's it. Technology can do some great stuff. It can get rid of the heavy lifting side of things and get us to focus on the hospitality side of things. I guess I'm assuming some of the challenge out there is that plenty of hotels are still wrestling with disconnected systems.
Yeah.
And how much of the performance issue really sits with integration and data quality rather than the tools themselves?
Yeah, it's not a great picture, I would say, especially for independent, because what I see is a lot of different systems for a different piece of a puzzle. So maybe you would have an upsell system, maybe you would have a CRS. I've even seen it like, then you have a different one for GDS because maybe you're collaborating with somebody. So it's really, and then you could have like a Ferrari in one field, and then your PMS is super outdated, and then there's like maybe not an option for a two-way connection, so the data is not flowing back where it should. So then you have different numbers in different systems. I'm really seeing a lot of these things still today. So I'm always a little bit, especially for independent, try to find the systems that are really one-stop shop. It's where you can do your revenue, where you can have your PMS, so there are some systems like that, but it's really, really hard. There's so many things out there. And then also, how do you also make a decision? So this is something, of course, that I do research and consult on. What would make sense for your hotel, right? Or if you have a smaller chain or whatnot. Yeah, and really, so I do a lot of demos of different systems just for my knowledge.
Sure,
so I
of course.
know what's out there, what are the capabilities, and also
the limitations.
I worked with some system like 4 years ago, and I want to know, okay, where are they now? What did they develop? So I think that's also really important. But the system data integration. But what I see also, data is not, like somebody was actually selling me a CRS. for a client the other day, and then I said, okay, and they're like, okay, we're gonna do all the duplicate profiles. We do that for you. And I said, okay, and then what happens in my PMS? Is it gonna go down into my PMS and also have it cleaned there? Oh no, So I want that to be cleaned in all systems.
Completely.
Yeah. So those are the things
Yeah.
that I think we're
Yeah. Well, that's it. And it's good that you are having those conversations, because certain things that hotels can do now that they can focus that are tool agnostic, because the tools will continue to evolve. Clean data is one of the things that goes across the board. And that's something that, they can start putting the plan in place. But the integration piece is critical, because if there's not APIs there, then it's static CSV files flowing one way, then it's a waste of time, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
Let's segue a little bit to profitability beyond rooms. You've pushed beyond the traditional room night view of revenue. Where are the underused revenue opportunities you see most often inside hotels today?
There are many. And I think this is also where, for example, when I work with independents, I can really make an impact, because I will really think about anything that can make money, essentially,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And how are we utilizing it and how are we selling it? And also it's good, I think, to test and try, and then you can come back and, okay, this, like nobody's buying a champagne for their room on our website before they arrive, then we're going to remove it. Maybe they do, right? So those are the things. But ancillary revenue is a huge thing. And what I also see, a total revenue management, including everything, but also the room as a starting point, is not really happening with independents.
No tref bar.
Yeah. So there might be like different pieces that they're doing, they might be doing like pre-arrival, upsell email, but yeah, maybe they're not looking at their restaurant menu, and does the revenue should even look at the pricing of the restaurant menu together with the restaurant manager, right? Because
yes,
does this make sense? Of course, they are purchasing, they're doing the cost, they're doing all of that, but it's maybe it comes even to training, or how is that server going to upsell on certain things, and what do they need to focus on upselling. And then what I see happening even less is making projections and all these things. So we are forecast on the room. We're not doing forecast on the F&B. We're not doing forecast, like often, let's say groups should be doing their forecast, and that should come to me. And I shouldn't be predicting what's going to happen with their leads. I don't know their leads. They are doing it.
Yeah.
So this is the kind
and that will evolve as their forecasting is picked apart, and it'll get better over time. But if they're not even reviewing it, then
I can make a wild guess, like, okay, last year this is what happened, so like, wind will blow this way, I think. So I think we're gonna have this kind of revenue next month in groups. Well, they know what they have in leads and what could still materialize, and how much that is, right?
Yeah, completely. I liked what you said there about working with the restaurants on F&B as well, because, for example, if decisions are made on the segmentation mix is going to change, then that needs to be reflected in the prices in the restaurant and the kind of customer that you're going after. Yeah.
I have a client now, they have a spa. So based on the promotions that we are going to do on our website from the revenue perspective, this will, and if I include a 30-minute massage or 60-minute massage in my promotion, maybe that will really impact their revenue and how busy they are. So there has to be communication. Okay, what do you need from the spa perspective? What can we push for you?
Yeah.
And
do you have the labor?
Selling that sell for you. So this is the kind of communication that should be happening with every department, essentially, right?
Yeah. Well, it all comes down to decision making. So when you look at hotels and how they run their meetings, I think back from when I was on property and our weekly revenue sales strategies and so on, their meetings, their reporting, their decision making, what are the tells when you're looking at that performance is leaking, and what tends to actually fix it?
Yeah, I think mostly what I see, the explanation of what's happening with the business towards other department comes normally from revenue, right? And then, you have a GM asking the sales manager, hey, what is happening with this? And, that's what you often see in independence. So I think the way I always like to do this is really share the information that is relevant, right? So I'm not going to go back and, explain why last week's STR report materialize the way it did. I'm looking at it for a year ahead, how that week is going to perform, and I'm responsible essentially on this, right? So I don't need to explain that to general manager, like we are, but to understand what we are expecting, right? Like talking about the forecast, talking about, how things are going towards our budget, because that will really impact their cost, their cash flow essentially, right? So these are the
Yes.
like it needs to make sense what kind of information you are feeding that is relevant to whoever you are talking about, right? Or general manager telling me, well, we really have problem with these two rooms, and we really giving me the right story that he doesn't think is going to come back into inventory for 2 months. That is a piece of information that I need to know
100%.
when it comes to my pricing and all kinds of things, right? So it's, I am all for these meetings, but there should be really efficient flow of
Structure.
structure.
Yeah, very much so.
And I
Yeah.
also, throughout my career, I looked at the structure of certain meetings when I saw that there was not, like, we didn't really have the fire happening, that we would come out of this meeting, we're like, okay, this was productive. And as soon as I would see that a meeting that's especially recurring doesn't have that, I would really look at the flow of the meeting. Okay, who's talking? Why are we talking? What are we talking about? What is the piece of information we are oversharing, or what is the piece of information that we're missing in this meeting? And it's
Yeah.
really also joint decision. I can make suggestions. Everybody can make suggestions. We are going to change the format of the meeting. Or maybe,
Sure.
very often I'm like, okay, this meeting, I'm not needed there at all. So I'm like,
It should be about making decisions, shouldn't it? Because now everyone has the data that can all be shared through other channels. It's going there. You've read the data. This is what we're proposing. Let's make a decision.
Yeah, and
Bang.
also, I would also educate whoever needs to read a certain report. I'm happy to jump on one call and really show you through what you're looking at, how you read it. I can do it multiple times, but I'm not going to jump on a call to explain it to you, because you should be able to just read the report, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's for a different call, a different meeting, isn't it? It's more of an education side of things. Let's look ahead a little bit. As AI and automation keep moving, what do hotels need to protect or get right if they want to stay competitive?
Yeah, I think it's data, of course. It's a tricky one. And how are you going to, work with your data, store your data, organize your data? I think that's a really, really big one that we need to, focus on, especially like from the, and then also how can you really utilize the AI modules to automate things more? I'm all for automation. So I don't,
Sure.
as I mentioned, I don't think it's going to take, my job away. It's going to make it easier,
Completely. I think as long as people get on board from a trust perspective and there's sufficient guardrails and SOPs around this, that's friction in the business that you can do without, and it can free up time to do other things.
Yeah. And I think it's also really important to do the proper training. So I also see a lot of companies like, we're going to implement AI just to implement AI, right?
Yes.
So like, why are you really going to do this? And then educating your team how to properly use it, because it's
100%.
very volatile, right?
Because a lot of people will just see this as an additional thing being put onto their role. And those are the people that you usually get chosen. They're the ones that are already stretched because they're good and they get given everything, and it doesn't work. 95% of AI rollouts in big corporations are failing because of that, because people are not AI ready.
Yeah. So I think it really comes with a proper AI training. You can hire companies to do that. So everybody knows how to utilize it, how to do the prompts, what to share in there, what not. These are the things that are a little bit scary, of course, if it's not done. But that's what I would do if I had
completely.
Hotel, is really educating people of AI, because as I said in my daily work, I talk to 3 different AI platforms, and I'm very critical, and I'm always questioning, and this is why I maybe certain thing I will ask to all 3, and I will get sometimes very different information, and also I even caught in certain situation that it was a misinformation.
Completely. That's the thing. Hallucinations are very real. If used properly, it actually challenges your own critical thinking, and that's a good place to be in. But not everyone, especially at hotel level, will be on the same trajectory that you or I may very well be. And so they need to think not to do everything at once. Choose one test case, have a 90-day window and say, this is what we're going to achieve, who's going to own it, how we're going to measure it. Then we're going to debrief. If it's not going to work, we're going to pause it. Then we're going to try something else.
Indeed.
Anyway, we're getting towards the end of the show. Let's finish with a few quick ones. One KPI you trust the most?
I would say year-on-year growth. Because this is something, because I was just thinking, because, like, of course, budget is normally like the main KPI when it comes to the company's KPIs. But often it's, it's also you're predicting your future. You're, maybe making somebody happy that wants to grow this much. But I think really looking at your historical data and then basing your pricing and decisions with some growth to that. I think that is, so year-on-year growth, you should be able to do.
In terms of profit.
Yeah, you should be able to do. And this is, I would say that one.
Okay. No, very, very nice. One mistake you see again and again.
Reverse pricing is happening a lot. And I see it in different markets where people start with very ambitious pricing far out, especially when it comes to big events, like
the Olympics.
Oh my God, we're going to grow like 1,000%. Never happens. And then, 2 weeks before the event, everybody just starts dropping rates like crazy.
Yeah.
And I see that, of course, the room that's sold today is never going to be sold when tomorrow happens, right? Yes. But so how can I really get to that point that I don't need to, drop this rate by 50% on the day of just to move some rooms, because that's hurting the market.
One underrated revenue lever.
Ancillary revenue, I think, is kind of what we touched on, but that is really where you can, don't focus just on your rooms, but focus on everything that can be.
And I love that. And I've talked to people a lot about that. It's also thinking, because if an owner has real estate across different asset classes, they're very used to talking about profit per square meter. And it's looking at your floor plate and really maximizing revenue as much as possible. I think that's a journey that the industry needs to really get on.
I just wrote a blog actually like a month ago or something around that subject, and it was really about underutilization of the meeting spaces. And how it's not really being calculated. So you're looking at, okay, I sold it for this lunch event and I made 3,000, right? Yay. But then that room was empty for the breakfast and dinner time. So really calculating this square meter revenue is also something that you really need to focus on. And then, you can maybe do something in the mornings. I don't know, there can be yoga class there.
Oh, completely. Yeah, get creative and have a strategy around it. I used to work in a hotel that was a big hotel, and they had 84 suites. And we used to look about, suite utilization, because the reality was a lot of the time it was just being given as free upgrades. And you're just thinking, how can we monetize this? One thing hotels should stop doing tomorrow.
Not doing revenue. It's really funny because some of the clients, and this is really like, it gives me a lot of pleasure when I can really make an impact. But, it's like I have a 30-room beautiful boutique property, and I'm not doing revenue. So so I think something, you don't have to maybe have a revenue manager. But if you actually have strategy in place and somebody, looking at your rates and things like that, that will really make an impact. Like, it's really impacting how much money you
I can't actually believe what you're saying. In terms of 2026, there's hotels out there without having a revenue strategy. It's that's wild.
Yeah, where often you see a GM kind of having all these, wearing all kinds of shoes, different hats.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you see them like once every few weeks changing a rate based on what others did, right? Or like this.
Yeah, we'll take that 100-bedroom group on a Wednesday. That's fine. That won't screw us at all.
I think you really should be doing it. So,
Vlatka, thank you. Really enjoyed that. A lot here that owners and operators will recognize, which is the point. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next week in Amsterdam. And thank you, listeners, and I'll see you in the next boardroom conversation.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I see you next week.